Hi, and thank you for joining us today for today's Care Team Chronicles. Today, I have the unique pleasure to bring to our community a man that has experienced a multitude of emotional and physical trauma and has transformed his life to one of hope and purpose. Please welcome Trevon Ferguson.
Hey everybody, sorry about that. My beautiful wife was just paying me a visit here. how's
Ah,
it How's it going, Lisa?
what good timing. It's going
Awesome.
so well, Trevon. I am so happy to have you on Care Team Chronicles because this segment is intended to be for our realm of caring's community. And as I told you before, in one person, unfortunately, you embody so much of our community. You have lived with a traumatic brain injury, with chronic pain, with epilepsy, with PTSD. You're a survivor of cancer. Um, and you've made, and there's more. You've lost digits. You've been through every trauma that I can imagine. And what makes it so fascinating to me and really inspires me, and I'm sure inspires so many people, is that um, you found a way to really find purpose and be able to be a voice for the people that are unspoken um, for, and you're able to provide inspiration and um, and mostly that that message of not giving up. So tell us a little bit about your story and what brings you in front of us here today.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Lisa. I appreciate that. In fact, thank you to yourself and the entire Realm of Caring family for what you guys are doing in all the communities that I happen to be a part of. I think, as my shirt says, quality of life matters, and sometimes, if you look at my Facebook post, sometimes it's so easy to forget the people around us who are struggling. Travon Ferguson, I was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago down in the Caribbean, migrated to the United States December of 1994. And then exactly, I would say probably 5 months to the day, I decided that I wanted to go pursue a career in adventure. So I went into the United States Army. Um, in During my military service, unfortunately, I was involved in a terrible vehicular accident, which is what resulted in my traumatic brain injury. From that accident, not only did I sustain injuries to my knee and my back, but I now currently live with epilepsy, as you've mentioned, dealt with chronic headaches and migraines for well over 23 years. You're talking about also dealing with sensitivity to light, terrible, terrible, terrible case of vertigo as a result of that. Um, have lived with and suffered from. So now I kind of changed the wording. I no longer tell people I suffer from, I just tell them I live with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And what brought us, the reason I'm sitting here on this particular platform today is because, like many of us who have struggled with pain and any type of trauma, I've also stood on the doorstep of suicide. In fact, the there were two attempts and then many days of thought of suicide. And however, 2 years ago, back in September of 2018, was what I would say the culminating event as it relates to suicide. And it just so happened that on that day, a friend of mine gave me a phone call. Now, people in this social media world were connected, but so disconnected. And he had no idea when he called me just how bad things were. But he called me to share an idea about a project that he wanted to work on. So what that idea did for me, one, it it made me realize that I still had something to live for. That's the first thing. The second thing was that um, even though my wife was in the fight with me, there was somebody beyond the walls of my house that actually cared enough and thought that I was worth a phone call, right? And the third thing was that the project also had some products that he wanted me to that he recommended I try it out just to see if it would even give me any type of relief. And actually, it did. The products, the supplements actually started helping, and so it began this journey from. And I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I was in a place where I was so angry because I felt that all the 8 entities that I went to try to get help, they weren't providing the help. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was just asking to be pointed in the right direction with the correct information to continue fighting. Instead, I got put on 5 different medications for my epilepsy, and if you ask my wife, she can tell you because I journal a lot. We noticed that with every addition of every medication, I started having more and more seizures. I don't know how that how that works. So so with that phone call, it started this quest to okay, let me shift from being angry and frustrated to let me just find some resources. And one of the resources I got connected to in that search was the Adaptive Training Foundation based in Carrollton. You guys, Realm of Caring has a beautiful partnership with the Adaptive Training Foundation that allowed myself and all the other athletes to get access to quality CBD products from Charlotte's Web. And as I shared on one of my other talks, that one of the things I love about Charlotte's Web is uh, their steadfast determination in providing quality natural products, right? And for me, that speaks to them being in alignment with what God's purpose is for each of us, right? By choosing, choosing the earth and using the earth, right? So thanks to that, now I was given a lifeline unlike anything I had had access to before. And so now we started seeing these, dramatic improvements in health, dramatic improvements in pain reduction, all these things, and we jump forward almost to 2 years, and now it's like wow. People tell me I'm a whole new different a whole different person. Well, what I tell them is I'm the same person. God has just chipped away the rough edges now, and you guys are getting to see the work of art, right? And in spite of the fact that I still live with epilepsy, in spite of the fact that I still deal with and manage pain, in spite of the fact that it's a daily back and forth dealing with the anxiety and the depressive thoughts. I've been given a gift, and as I shared with you before when we talked, with these gifts, right? So epilepsy, depression, PTSD. Some people may disagree, but I get to be a voice for people who may not necessarily have a voice. Some people have epilepsy that's so debilitating they can't even talk. But I get to be the individual who lives with epilepsy, and I can be a voice for that individual. I get to be the individual who can speak up for veterans who are hurting. I get to be, um, in fact, look, I'm on a Realm of Caring platform, right? An organization that has done so much for people living with epilepsy, for people who are living with chronic pain, thoughts of suicide. I mean, if you had told me 2 or 3 years ago that I would be a voice for Realm of Caring or a voice for Charlotte's Web or the Adaptive Training Foundation or High Fives in Tahoe or the National Ability Center, I never imagined that this pain that I was experiencing would actually pull me through to my purpose. So that's why we're here today. Those gifts, and I want to make sure the audience understands that I had to make a conscious choice to shift my thinking from, oh my goodness, why is this happening to me, to okay, well, why not me, right? So seeing all these challenges as gifts rather than problems.
Wow, wow. No wonder you're sitting here in front of me. Um, you posted something over the weekend on your social media that really, even me working here at the Realm of Caring and being exposed, well, to, to so much that I had no idea existed. You said that 20, 22 veterans commit
Yes.
suicide every single day. 22, that means that it's a little bit, it's 11 o'clock in the morning here in Colorado Springs. That's like 8 people have already taken their lives. And by the time we have dinner tonight, that could be 18 people a day. That really, really hit home for me. Why is that, do you think, Trevon?
Well, unfortunately, um, most of our heroes, as I call them, are dealing with some type of trauma, some type of post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, chronic pain. I mean, think about this. I was involved in a vehicular accident. I'm not knocking the military. I'm honored to have served, and if I could do it now again, I probably would, just because it affords the people I love and the people I care about the freedoms that we enjoy here in the United States. And so I was involved in an accident, and then 2 days later, I was back to work. It wasn't, that's we're trained to move the pain aside and keep trucking with the mission. That's the price of our freedom. So all the people that take for granted what our veterans do, all the people that don't care what our veterans do, or all the people that say, "Well, you guys volunteered to do that." That's the cost of your freedom, right? And so every day you have servicemen and women who are struggling with pain, struggling with suicidal thoughts. I mean, I still have nightmares from my accident and things of that nature. So now, unfortunately, and that statistic, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but there's an organization called 22 Kill. That organization initially was formed to bring awareness to that staggering statistics of how many veterans we lose every single day to suicide, right? And so now the great thing is, and again, 22 Kill is another great organization that I've gotten to work with. In fact, I did my counseling through them, my psychological counseling through them, and instead of just bringing awareness, they now have programs on board for veterans, first responders, and their families to deal with that. But the level of pain that our heroes deal with, the things that our heroes see when they get deployed, the things that they have to carry with them on their psyche, it's eating them alive. And so as a result, we have this very staggering and painful statistic that 22 of our heroes are gone, are lost every day because they fall into that point. And one of the reasons I made the post, I don't know if you noticed, in the bottom of the post, I said that I'm no longer going to be silent about this. And the reason I said that was because there was a time when I was ashamed to talk about my mental health struggles. I was ashamed to talk about the fact that suicide seemed like an option to me. And then what I did was, when I went to counseling, I got some information. I made aware of what's really happening to an individual who's on the doorstep of suicide. Because unfortunately, sometimes people who don't understand, they can be judgmental, right? And imagine telling a guy who has served this country, he's come back, he's living with pain, and you have people out there judging that individual for whatever reason it is. And so now, the individual is struggling with whatever happening in his brain chemistry, right? That's causing these thoughts of depression. And suicide seems to be the only way out. Imagine, you can't work because you're struggling to just be social. These are things that our veterans, our heroes live with every single day. Imagine, being uncomfortable because people look at you differently because maybe you're a single leg amputee or whatever it is. I mean, these are real world problems that I would say not only our veterans live with, but anybody who's struggling with any type of adaptive situation, whether it's spinal cord injuries, any type of traumatic injuries, and of course, depression usually follows any type of injury, right? Because your self-worth has changed because part of your physical makeup has changed. And unfortunately, our heroes are struggling with that. And I think the work that Realm of Caring is doing, the work that High Fives Foundation, Adaptive Training Foundation, 22 Kill, Operation Enduring Warriors is another organization that I'm partnered with. The work that these organizations are doing is critical in ensuring that we get that number down. There's a saying that one veteran suicide is one too many, but suicide on the whole, one is just one too many. But I can speak from the perspective of, I'm connected to these organizations, and that's where I'll start, right? That's another reason why I'm on it, because I know it's not just veterans on here that's going to hear about suicide. I know there's civilians that hear about it. There's family members of people who have committed suicide that may be connected to Realm of Caring. How can we prevent the next one through? I think there's a couple of things we need to do.
Yeah.
One, there needs to be a heightened awareness. All too often, we take for granted when people are dealing with depression. All too often, we take for granted when people are crying out for help. All too often, we ignore people's pain, and then after the fact, we react. Right. So there has to be an increase of awareness. Like, we have to sound off. We can't be afraid any longer to talk about it, as uncomfortable as it is. And that includes, and I will say this at the risk of stepping on some toes, and that includes in church. Mental health struggle is one of the taboo subjects that in church we tend to shy away from. But that's the place that we need to bring it to the forefront so that we can, have some type. That's the first thing, awareness. The second thing is that we need to have an intentional community effort to get rid of this thing. Just like we have this war on cancer and this attack and all these other ailments that we have, mental health issues is a real viable problem in our world, not just our country. There needs to, so the awareness, and then this community collective fighting against it, and then we actually need to take action. In fact, I just gave you an acronym for the word ACT, right? So awareness, community, and take action. We need to stop talking post the loss. So, oh man, uh, I I knew he was struggling with something, but I didn't realize it was that bad. So even if the person is struggling and you don't think it's that bad, that's when we need to reach out. That's when we need to connect. That's when we need to ask questions. And sometimes the questions may seem uncomfortable. It may not be fun, but it may be the life that you save by doing that.
I love that you say that, Trevon, because I believe, need to get more comfortable with seeing people being a little uncomfortable. So what I mean by that is that so many times in these very delicate situations, we don't want to see somebody cry or become upset or become emotional. So we tend to just not talk about important things. And I think we need to become comfortable with that it's okay if somebody cries. It's a way for them to express their emotion. It means that you're talking about something meaningful. And all of these subjects, I'm getting goosebumps, are so meaningful and they're so important. And I come from the belief system that somebody can always say, I don't want to talk about it, if they don't. And do you know that anytime that I've had a very sensitive conversation with somebody or talked about the elephant in the room, I've never had someone say they don't want to talk about it. They're so grateful to have the opportunity to share their feelings, even if it makes them angry or cry or show emotion. We need to get more comfortable. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. There's a saying that we have that says it's okay to not be okay.
I
Like
love
we
it.
have to we have to be okay with not being okay, and then we have to ensure that the people around us understand that it's okay for them to. Ladies and gentlemen, think about this. If man was created and designed and fashioned from the earth, right? We follow the earth's behavior. So in Colorado Springs, it's snowing right now. Here in Dallas, it's cold and rainy. But guess what? In 3 days, it's going to be hot and sunny. It's not bright and sunny every single day, right? So it's okay. And we have to, even with our children, and I think that's where the problem starts too,
Mhm.
is that we tend to pressurize our children to the point where they don't really want to express how they're truly feeling, right? In boys, it's not okay for a boy to cry and be emotional. It's not. It's not the macho thing to do. Girls are taught, unfortunately, subconsciously or otherwise, to hold their tongues. And so we have individuals who have grown up into adults now, and then they experience trauma, and that same behavior that was taught to them over and over and over and over again of not expressing how they truly feel is how they deal with it. And we have to collectively, those of us who had or struggle with thoughts of suicide or who had mental illness, those of us who lost loved ones to mental health or suicide or anything of that nature, we now have to collectively ensure that in creating this awareness and creating this education and getting information out to the masses, ensure that they understand that it's okay to not be okay, right? And make it okay to ask for help. And we look around our country, look at what's happening to some of our professional athletes and how they struggle. And then it's when they fall off the cliff as a public, then we start criticizing them. But all along the way, nobody's taking the time out to identify the little things that they see. And I use the professional athletes simply because it's something that's easily identifiable. But I'm sure in your corporate offices, in your schools, everywhere, we're seeing these signs. But like you said, we haven't made it okay to talk about these taboo subjects, and we haven't made it okay to come and ask for help when we're struggling with these emotional and mental issues. And that's what we need to do across the board.
Absolutely. Um, you have many wonderful quotes, and one of them comes from the High Five Foundation, the video that you did with them. And it's don't hammer away what holds you together. Is that some of what you mean when you say that?
So, and if you notice in that part of the video, it shows pictures of my. So it starts with the pictures of my mom and grandmother, and then it shows some pictures of my kids, and then it culminates with the picture of my wife and I walking. And the the thing about these struggles in communities of trauma is that sometimes the caregivers get lost, right? And that's what the that quote is resonating with is that so the video, for those of you that may not have seen it, the premise is that me today is having a conversation with me about 20 years ago, right around when I got injured, right? And so I'm explaining to my younger self how to navigate the road that's coming ahead. And one of the problems is that when you're dealing with anxiety and depression and pain, you can isolate and push the people that you love, and that includes friends and coworkers, away, because in your head, in your heart, you believe that they don't know what you're going through. Now, I heard a quote from, it was repeated by David Vabora of the Adaptive Training Foundation, but I think he got it from his wife. So I'm gonna make sure Sarah gets her credit. But the question is, would you want your family members and friends to actually know what you're going through? I would tell you that I would never want my kids or my wife to experience what I've experienced, the type of pain and trauma that I have. So now we have to shift our thinking from, well, they don't understand what I'm going through or they don't know what I'm going through, to perspective. What's their perspective? They can only see from their perspective, right? And perspective drives behavior. They only know what they know from their viewpoint. And so in our struggle and in our fight to find our footing, we have to be mindful. And this is intentional. It's not easy because when you're dealing with anxiety and depression, you're already fighting inside your head, right? So it's hard to see it from the other person's viewpoint. But that don't hammer away at what holds you together is an intentional fight to ensure that you hold close the people that you love, the people that you care about, the people that care about you, the people that are in the trenches and in the fight with you. That's what that quote is about.
Mm. More chills. You also have something that you say that I think is very relevant in today's world when we're seeing so much political upheaval, we're seeing racial injustice. Uh, we're right now in the middle of a pandemic, both of us in each other's homes. You talk about getting through life through moments. Tell us more about that.
So if you think about it, I tell my kids you can't get to a dollar unless you start with a penny, right? So life is a series of moments tied together. So for example, right now we're communicating in a series of moments from the time we began at the top of the hour till when we end. It's just one moment after other. And we have to get to a point where we're mindful in the moment that, okay, I could be mad, or better yet, the best analogy I can use is think about a kid. You scold a kid, right? And 5 seconds later, they come back to you with the same energy, the same love, the same vivacious vibe about them that, hey, they're going to ask for the cookie again. Because that moment when you scolded them about asking for the cookie, it's already gone to them. And their spirit is so open to the next moment. So I'm going to try again. And then ultimately, what happens? They wear us down with so many moments that we ultimately give them the cookie, right? But that's the thing, though, that we we have to get to a point where we're mindful in our moments that even even if you're upset or like I'll do this to my wife sometimes. We'll just get through kind of disagreeing about something, and then I'll just talk to her like nothing happened, because that moment of the disagreement doesn't mean that we're mad forever. At least that's how I carry it. Because what happens is when you start carrying those, now you start stacking moments of that's how you stack moments of anger and pain on top of one another. And when you're struggling with anxiety and depression, that's a quick switch to turn those struggles on. Now what's happening is you're weighed down by so many moments of I don't like this, I hate this, I can't stand this, that the moments of taking a moment to notice the good things around you, those get lost in the shuffle. And so I try to encourage people to take it one moment at a time. You may have a bad moment right now, but 5 seconds later, that moment can change. Somebody can say something. You may see something, right? And it may not be that simple, but if you think about it, that phone call I got 2 years ago that saved my life, that was a moment. It took a moment for him to make the decision to call me. It took a moment for him to pick up the phone and actually follow through and call me. It took a moment for me to answer the phone and have the conversation with him, right? And it took a moment for me to listen to what he was saying. And then it took a moment for me to decide to keep fighting on. So if we start focusing on intentionally controlling our moments, I think we regain better control over some of the struggles that we have.
Hmm. I really appreciate that. Many philosophers talk about living in the moment, and the moment being all that really exists. And if you're ever in a moment of anxiety, it's usually because you're in the past or you're in the future. So I really can appreciate that you put that out for us, even in 12-step programs. It's about taking it a day at a time, and sometimes you have to break it down even smaller to an hour at a time, to a few minutes at a time. But I think in almost anything that you do, even if you were out doing a race, if you look ahead as to how far you have to go, you're more likely to give up. But if you only say, well, I'm going to make it to that tree that's about 10 feet away from me, and when you get to the tree, you're going to set another small goal, then before you know it, you can accomplish something pretty great.
Yes, I 100% agree with that.
Yes, I thought you would. um, Another thing that you talk about, and I think we have different words for the same thing, is purpose. A
Yes.
life of hope and purpose. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by that.
Okay, so purpose. In fact, I think the best definition of purpose I've ever heard was from Dr. Miles Monroe. And he said, purpose is simply original intent. So, what's the original intent of the divine creator for humanity? What's the intent of us being here? And there's an intention for all of us to be here. There's a reason why we're here. We were created with a purpose, on purpose, for a purpose, right? But when we lose hope, that purpose gets buried in darkness. So, for example, here I am, a father, grandfather, husband, I work. Uh, I start losing hope because I'm in so much pain. And then I no longer see myself as a provider. I no longer see myself as an example of what a man should be or is supposed to be based on the parameters and the definition of what we've been given as what a man is supposed to be, right? And then you take that away because the definition is so skewed. Now it's like, okay, well, I can't provide the way I'm supposed to provide because I have this injury and this condition, then I'm now a burden instead of a provider. So I don't need, so I don't want to be here because I don't want to be a burden to anyone. And you lose sight of what, and in that moment, literally, you lose sight of why you're here. Even with thoughts of suicide, you're so buried with the burden of hopelessness that things can't get any better, that you don't see a way out but to check out, right? And so for me, in turning the ship around, the the light of hope was the phone call. Okay, hey, here's a project that I think not only that you would love, but here's some supplements that can probably help you. That light of hope now means that okay, I'll keep searching for answers, right? So when the I've heard it said from one of my mentors that hope is the the foundational quality of all change. I just use it as hope is the cornerstone of change, and change is the cornerstone of possibility. So, for example, when he started talking about that project, I got excited because I'm like, well, even in spite of having epilepsy, here's something good I can do. Right. When I went to the Adaptive Training Foundation, even with my missing digits, one of the trainers said, "Hey, you want to try doing a Spartan?" Nobody had ever asked me that before. In fact, I had been told all the things that I can't do, shouldn't do, and would never be able to do again. So again, there's that hopelessness setting in because it's like, well, and I'm no good to anyone, right? But once that sliver of hope oh, shines through, then it gives you an option or an opportunity to see what's possible. And what's possible then connects you to, okay, if this is possible, then why am I truly here? Like, why is it that I live with epilepsy, but I'm not debilitated like most are? Maybe it's because I'm supposed to be the voice that fights for the people who can't fight for themselves. Maybe I'm supposed to be the voice that speaks up for veterans to get better care. Maybe I'm supposed to be the voice that connects Charlotte's Web to the veteran community that to ensure that our heroes get taken care of when they're struggling. Um, so that hope now opens the door to connect you to, well, why? Why am I here? Why am I going through this? Why, and in business, I've heard it said that once you understand or you know the why, the how gets easier. I didn't, I didn't expect to do half the things I am doing now. Since I've connected with the Realm of Caring and Adaptive Training Foundation in Charlotte's Web, I've run well over 50 something 5Ks. I've done 5 Spartan races, and I was told a couple of years ago that none of this would be possible. But once I was given the hope that I could do that, the purpose of being a voice for people who are struggling came shining through, because now here you have this gentleman with epilepsy who's running sprint races. Is it dangerous? Yeah, but it's so much bigger than me. The kid who sees that, who's living with epilepsy, who's being teased at school, now realizes that, man, I can do that. He's just like me, but I can do that. I can do cool stuff. I can still, and again, the shirt says it best: quality of life matters. The person struggling with the deepest, darkest depression and that hears my story now says, "Oh wow, and he was right where I was. If he can get to that point, then maybe it's possible that I can get to that point as well." And now they start climbing out by looking for more answers. And so, whenever I talk anywhere, I use those two words a lot: hope and purpose, because hope is the key that unlocks the door, and purpose is why you're unlocking the door.
Perfect. I really commune with what you have to say. I also want to take a moment for the people that are watching us, that because people want to help Trevon, don't they? People want to do something. They don't always know what to do, and I want to speak a little bit. And this is something that you touched upon, that is rather simple, and it makes a huge impact. And you talk about it when you're talking about suicide, and that is for for one other human being to believe in you, like the person that said, "How do you feel about doing this race?" And believing that you could do it, or as you mentioned, having Ellie Michaels, who made the beautiful film What I Know Now, to say, "What do you think about jumping in the cold water of Lake Tahoe?" You're like, "Well, I don't know how to swim, but okay." No,
Yeah.
it wasn't that easy, I know. But just knowing that somebody believes in you. And then the other thing I'm going to mention, that is something very simple that we can do, and we need to learn to become better at it, is just being a good listener. It's such great therapy for somebody to just be able to unlodge their feelings and what's going on inside their brain, and just being an empathic listener, don't you think?
Yes, and listening without judgment, right? So a lot of times we listen to give a response immediately. But sometimes the person doesn't necessarily need a response; they just need to hear, right? And so the ability to just listen quietly, and in fact, sometimes this is I always laugh at my wife when she does this, because so she'll be talking and I'll just be listening and I won't say anything, and then she's like, "Hey, you gonna say anything?" I'm like, "Nope, I'm listening," and I don't know if it makes her uncomfortable or just just throws her off, because I think too often we don't do that. We don't have people just really listen to us. What happens is we have a conversation. Well, two people are talking. One person is talking, and the other one is just waiting for them to stop so they can say their piece. But sometimes you really need to just stop, listen to the person fully, right? Not interject, not give a response immediately, and really absorb and internalize, and see it not only from your perspective, but the perspective that they're presenting to you, right? So, it's, for example, it's like a house. You may be driving down the street of this house, and the house looks pristine and beautiful in the front, but then somebody else may be driving down the back alley, and it's a dump in the back. Same house, different perspective, and that a lot of times that gets lost in conversation, because people are not they're listening so they can respond immediately, as opposed to listening so that they can really absorb and hear what what the person is saying. It's like having a conversation with God, right? You talk, but sometimes you don't get the response immediately. And then when you do get the response, you're like, wow, okay. And that's, I think that with people and listening, that's the point we need to aspire to genuinely hear and feel what the person is saying, so that if we are to render any assistance and help and advice, it's coming from a place where we have their perspective fully in hand.
Yeah, I can't say enough what a gift this is, and it's something that we can all work on. I know that something that's very common, and I'll give an example. Let's say I go to my best friend and she's asked me how I'm doing, and I open up my heart and I say, well, I had a really hard day today. And they might say, oh, I had a hard day too. This happened. And then suddenly you're talking about their hard day. I say this out loud because I'm working on not doing that. And then that person doesn't get the opportunity to really get whatever they needed off their chest. I really like that you say to really bringing back the moments, to be in that present moment and not offer, not necessarily having to offer any type of experience that is similar. And I know we do this because we want to let the person know, I know how you feel. I've had a hard day. I know what that feels like. So I understand why we say it, but it's probably not the best thing. And the other thing that I find is just getting comfortable with, like you say, to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. There might be pregnant silences. There's times when you might have to watch somebody cry, and that is fine. That's not a bad thing. If somebody cries, it's because you're talking about something meaningful, something tender and important. So I love that you have these concepts. It's in life, and I don't mean to be a pessimist, because anybody who knows me knows I'm not, but life is hard and it's full of challenges. And yes, there's fun times, and I always say there's ice cream, which is a great thing. But I feel that we're all here to be challenged in ways. And what I love about your story in particular, Trevon, is that you've taken um, this darkness that you've lived through, and you've really gotten to the other side of it, where you can be a voice of inspiration. And speaking of that, you mentioned earlier that you had a bad day yesterday. So even as we get to the other side, the side of hope and the side of purpose, it doesn't mean we don't have any bad days anymore, does it?
Right, exactly. I mean, that's, I mean, and I know we're up against it with the time, but what I want to remind people of is this: that the storms contribute. I mean, think about it. When it, people say when it rains, it pours, but imagine a sea without water. Everything has its place, everything has its season, everything has its moment. And so, no, yesterday was one of those days where, I was navigating through some pain and some discomfort. And that happens with the change in weather. And, I'm used to it now. Doesn't mean I enjoy it, but it was just one of those days where it wasn't the best. But again, going back to that place of mindfulness and not staying in the moment. In fact, the day was rough. And last night, up until midnight, I was walking around our complex because I hadn't gotten my 10,000 steps in yet. Right. So I had on some jeans and some tennis shoes and sweatshirt, and I was out walking. And lo and behold, I'm out walking. And I saw other people out walking at like 11:30 at night. Just, I'm not sure what their goal is, but I know mine was to get my 10,000 steps in, which I did. And then when I got through, I felt 100 times better. Again, there's no, we're not going to get out of this thing without challenges. In fact, if we didn't have challenges, I think we would probably be bored. But without challenges, there's no growth. I mean, gravity is a challenge. We need gravity in order for us to learn to stand, walk, and then run. And ultimately, even gravity helps us fly, right? So it's you know, we have to ensure that we understand that the smooth sailing is it doesn't exist. You know, we're going to have to navigate some ups, some downs, some rough waters, and that's ultimately what brings out the best in humanity. Like when man is faced with a challenge, ultimately that's when we find the best version of who we are, is when we rise to those challenges.
The best version of who we are. If that's not why we're here, then I don't know.
Right, exactly.
I love talking to you. I am so glad I met you and that I've had the opportunity to spend 45 minutes here with you. Every time I talk to you, I feel like I could do it all day. Um, is there any closing thoughts, anything that you want to say before we log off?
Yeah, we I want to close with this. We've used the word darkness here today, and I want to challenge the audience to be mindful of this. Sometimes you're not buried, sometimes you're planted. So the struggles you're going through, a lot of times we think, oh my goodness, all this is happening. I'm buried in debt, or this relationship isn't working, or this is happening. But if you think about it, right, consider yourself being a seed. Ultimately, in order for a seed to germinate and grow, we have to remove all light. Think about that. Trees don't grow until the seeds are planted. I mean, they're totally covered in the earth. And whatever happens once it's buried is there's these chemical changes that are taking place within the seed and around the seed. So whether it's in your environment or beyond, and also inside of you, some things are happening, right? You're getting stronger, you're learning, you're growing. And then all of a sudden, something happens where that external shell of the seed cracks open, right? It's still buried now, it's still buried, but it's pushing towards something. And once it cracks open, it has to push through all this mound of dirt. And it's pushing and it's pushing and it's pushing. And then ultimately, you see the first little green sliver push through the soil. Now, what was once buried and in the darkness has roots. In other words, it has a foundation. So when you're going through your struggle and you crack open, you're digging your roots in. Your strength is developing. Your power is developing. Your purpose is being unleashed, and you start reaching towards whatever it is you're reaching towards. Then you crack through the soil, and now there's sunlight, right? And now you have access to a whole nother dimension of energy and strength and a whole nother level of growth. There's still rainy days, but the seed still needs those water. And it's the same with us. We're still going to be watered by challenges. We're still going to be watered by uphill climbs. We're still going to be watered by sometimes negative people. But if you can look at your situation as not being buried by it, but simply being planted, on the other side of that is some amazing results. And I think that's when ultimately we reach to being the best version of ourselves.
I love it. Well, Travon Sundiata Ferguson, here is to blooming.
Exactly. I love it. Here's to blooming. Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for meeting me here today and meeting our viewers. For anybody that has missed this, we will have it up on our YouTube channel. So you're welcome to share that. And we'll see you for next Care Team Chronicles. Sasha will be interviewing Lucy from Paris, France. She's a nutritionist and has a lot of wonderful things to tell us, I'm sure in the most delectable accent. So thanks again, Travon. We'll see you again. Thanks for being on the show.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you and the entire Realm of Carry family for all that you do. I appreciate you guys.